Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Occult Exploration Society. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined today by my good friend Dion. How's it going, Dion?
Life is beautiful.
Amazing, amazing. And we will be joined later today by our dear friend, Dr. Ammon Hillman. He's going to be hopping in after Dion's presentation. He was busy today and needs a little bit of time in between, but he will be watching, tuning in to discuss with us after the presentation. And our friend Ryan may hop in, but he's also exhausted out in the UK where it's 10 p.m., I believe. So it could just be Dion and I. Either way, we're going to have a wonderful show for you. We're going to be talking about the Olympic Games. And first off, before we get into everything, Dion, what is that word, Patrios Agon? What is this? What does this mean?
One interpretation could be my father's agony. And another interpretation could be Patriot Games.
Oh, beautiful. Interesting.
With Agon being the god or the daimon of competition.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, that's so fun. So we wanted to talk about the Olympics for a couple different reasons. Number one, as people who are deeply interested in Hellenic paganism and, into all of the mystery rites and looking into the pop culture, I think we were as shocked as the world was when we saw Dionysus appear on the Charger Satyr plate as part of the opening ceremony, right? And showing up. And it was pretty wild, though, watching the Christians completely interpret it through the lens of Christianity and say that it was a mockery of the Last Supper. What was your thought on that whole thing, Dion?
So those are some of the base questions. One, was it a feast of Dionysus? Two, was it a Last Supper? We could look into a lot of things. And what I'll say, they're all of the above. All of the above. Yeah. We'll work it out and see. And not only are we going to look at the Olympic Games, we'll get into some other Panhellenic games.
Yeah, because there's originally there's the 4 Panhellenic games, right? It's the Pythian games, which is the OG one from the Oracle at Delphi. There's the Isthmian games, which were to Poseidon. And then there's the Nemean games to Zeus, and then the Olympian games to all the gods and Zeus.
And there's also the Hera games, the Heraian games to Hera. There's the Lycian games to Zeus Lycus, which is the wolf form of Zeus. There's lots of different versions. There's Spartan versions, Athenian versions. The more I started to look into it, as well as the Patrios Agon, which is a version that comes from Eleusis. And it's an Eleusinian game. And it was part of not the Eleusinian rites, but the Eleusinia, which was a harvest festival to Demeter. And they would play games.
Yeah, this is part of the lesser rites because, right, they were seasonal, and you had the big mystery rites. I'm trying to remember. September, I believe. We'll ask Ammon for clarification, but happened at the 2 equinoxes. But at one, they would do the Eleusinia, where they had the games, correct?
Well, we'll see. Well, he knows a little more about it. With the Olympics, we got different versions because we got a modern version, which was started in 1896. Mm-hmm. We got a historical version, and we got a mythical version. And so we'll look at some of the symbols and stories around these different versions. We got a lot to unpack. And trigger warning, because we might get into cannibalism and sacrifice and psychoactives, and because all that stuff came up in the research.
Right. And this is the Occult Explorers. And as always, this is our interpretation. Take everything with a grain of salt. We're going to bring you some sources. We're going to show you some pictures, but ultimately you make up your own minds and use your reason. Let reason be your guide, and like Dion said, be cautious. We're going to get into some violence, into some weirdness. So here we go. Let's start with our first picture, because this caused quite the controversy, you know, and for several different reasons. There even is some nudity. I'm not going to point it out, but people can see the nudity there. But, you know, the French couldn't care less about something like male nudity. Sorry, not even in front of children. It's just the human body.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
And for a reason, we've done multiple episodes talking about France as an epicenter of Satanism and esoteric Luciferian culture. It just happens to be there's lots of books out about that subject. And them hosting the Olympics where Macron wants to be Jupiter, sure. And we looked into the theater producer, the person who had the money to do this, that was in charge, and they wanted to bring back some of the older elements and Bacchic elements of these sporting festivals, just so you know. Now, one thing about the Olympics, since 1896, there's been about 20 to 22 of them, because every 4 years. And they've been, there's been lots of doping scandals, bribery scandals, world politics, a lot of money. Like the last one before this, I think it was 7 billion. And they have to find creative ways to get rid of this money. And so the Olympic Committee is famous for doing a lot of crazy stuff. So we would ask the question, I mean, doping, taking steroids are magic ingredients so you can go faster and jump higher. World politics, bribery, Last Supper, the Feast of Dionysus, all that is included in the original versions.
Yeah, well, this was the thing that blew my mind. When I started to see the Christian outcry, I was just at first, I was like, what? Okay, I mean, is this not the Olympics? Like, what did you not expect to see? Did you not expect to see Greek gods at the Olympics? And then the Feast of Dionysus, this is primordial. This happens at all of the big festivals. He's the dying and rising god, the god of the wine, right? And we've talked about this. We've done several episodes at this point on the feasting and the idea, the metaphors of cooking and the mystery rites and the charging plate itself, having the god come out on the plate, right? The satire, the mixed plate where you cut everything up and remix it, where the mystery rite takes place. Like, you couldn't get more Hellenic and pagan. It's like, I can understand why the Christians are offended on one hand because they hate everything pagan. But at the same time, this is the bloody Olympics. You know?
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of all this charger plate stuff and Dionysus stuff?
It's the Aegis shield. It's right. The charger plate that the head of John the Baptist. And when it has the mixed items on it, it's called the satire. The satire plate, the Saturn plate. And this is Saturnian magic. And one thing I'll tell you about the trans folks in the back with the heavy-set female in the middle is a throwback to what we call the Megalissaludi, which are the games to the goddess Cybele that were held in the Palatine Hill in the Galli priestesses. Yeah. And so there's a lot that's in here. And we got the 2 pillars and, you know, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, the Niscos pillars, or the pillars of Hercules, right? Famous too with the goddess Astarte. You always see the Great Mother in between 2 pillars, and look who you have. You have the divine representation of the Great Mother wearing the Venus crown in between the 2 Niscos pillars. Like, come on.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So this is a modern representation, let's say, of what we might have seen at an older Olympic event. Let's go to the next pick. 1936 Summer Olympics, famous one in Germany. Got the symbols right there. They were going to display the superiority of a certain group of folks. Go to the next pick. There's Stickelgruber doing a pagan salute, getting the athletes ready. Let's go to the next pick. Here's them getting their ass kicked by Jesse Owens.
Love it. Love this.
One of my favorite Olympics right here. Just saying. You know, I ain't going to say nothing else, but that's Jesse Owens right there. And they can interpret the name as Jesus if they want. So let's go to the next pick. So that was the modern Olympics. Now I want to talk about the historical Olympics, which is from 776 BC to about 400 AD. They were banned by Rome, and at a certain point they said, well, you can keep doing the sports part, just you can't do the sacrifices and the pagan stuff no more, and the theatrical stuff. And so and it was held in the historical version. It deals with Mount Olympus, and it's called Olympia. And right here, this is a picture of something called the Zanes, and these were statues, Zanes or Zanes, and their job was to punish the cheaters, because cheating was a thing back then. It was famous for athletes to take magic potions with mushrooms to go faster, for bribes. It was politics involved between different city-states and athletes. So it's the same thing that's happening now.
Yeah, we got to understand, right? Olympus is the religious site, right? For the Peloponnese, like everyone is coming to Olympus. It's a sacred site. And it traditionally had 3 different tribes that would administer over it. And at various times, various tribes would be in charge. And the games kind of comes out of a way to maintain this balance and to maintain this. And then it expands later in the history, right? I'm sure you'll get into more of this.
Well, and part of the thing, too, it was also a rival to the Eleusinian rites. Because at that time, those were the 2 biggest state festivals, along with what happens is what we call the Panhellenic Games. And in this first form of the Olympics, it was all male. I think the word of gymnikos is nude. And they were youths or teens competing in some basic competitions. Not all the sports we see today. Something like running, the long jump, javelin, the discus, which is a big part of it. We'll talk about. And they weren't competing for money, monetary prizes. They're competing for stephanos, crowns.
Yeah, oak leaves. Well, it depends. Later on, in the earliest version, it would be oak leaves, and then they became the laurel leaf crown. But yeah, you wanted to be crowned with the leaves.
And you get olives, bay laurel, and depending on the different gods or traditions. And one of the things is before the events there were sacrifices, and afterwards there was a big feast or banquets. A lot of the elements. So there was like a Last Supper, a big banquet, let's say. And like I said, there was doping, political intrigues, all kinds of stuff. We talked about the mushrooms. So eventually they let women into the games. So let's go to the next pick. I want to show you, this is a famous discus statue. In the discus, they would do a 1.5 twist and send that thing flying. That's your charger plate right there. We talk about that symbol and how it's special, and it have things engraved on it. So let's go to the next pick.
Yeah, and also we get that story right with Apollo. Apollo is really important to a lot of the games. Apollo founds the Pythian games, right? And he also famously kills one of his lovers by accident with the discus, So these are, and this is one of his things. His weapon is that discus, is that chakra. You also see this in the Indian tradition, the spinning disc, the chakra, in the earliest references within the Vedas. It's not anything to do with this New Age energy stuff. That all comes later. In the earliest texts, they're referring to the chakra as the spinning blade, this weapon that would be thrown as a disc.
And in some versions, it's attached, and they can bring it back when they're done.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. It's like this. There's all this wild conspiracy around it, as I'm sure many of us know. All right, let's continue.
So eventually they let women into the games. Caniska, if I'm saying it right, from Sparta, a princess of Sparta, and she took part and won the chariot races. these badass Spartan women. And her name means puppy love.
Oh, wow, cute.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big part of the story. What we're going to talk about is dogs and wolves, the Pelasgian and Etruscan wolf cults, Anatolian wolf cults. How, as part of the games, it goes to hunting rituals, let's say. And her father, his name is what? Kanikos. He was a breeder of hunting dogs. You know, and this gets into what's called Artemis Lycus, which is the lupine, the wolf element of Artemis, you know, hunting as the huntress. But she won the game, famous as a woman winning in the Olympics, going back to Sparta. You know, let's go to the next pick.
Yeah, Ammon can talk to us a lot about that, but there's all of this stuff about these werewolf cults connected with Artemis, where these people go out, howl under the moon, become possessed by that spirit of Artemis as the wolf mother, and then are able to perform so much better in the hunt. They are like the wolf, right? They embody the wolf.
Hungry like the wolf. Yeah, it's based on hunting rituals. Yeah. You know, that's what you'll come to find a lot of this sport is. And in terms of the founding of the games, there's different views, different authors will talk about it. Plutarch thinks it was a certain Lycurgus.
Lycurgus of Sparta.
Yeah, Lycurgus of Sparta, because they found a discus with his name on it. And that's what he talks about. And this is going back to Plutarch. He's talking about older times. There's other versions. And in one of the oldest and most popular, it deals with, how do you say it? Idios Dactylos Hercules. And founded the games for his father, Zeus. And it was a diamond. And it deals with these 5 diamonds, and they founded the games to honor Zeus, his battles and all this different stuff, and to honor the gods that kicked it at Olympus and drank their milky ambrosia. We've talked about the milky ambrosia in the past, because this is part of the games too. It came up, you know, their magic potions and drinks, and, you know, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, with the Hercules stuff, we'll get into it. I have some sources. I got some sources for a bunch of the different Greek game stuff, but it's interesting. It gets into the Herculean labors, the 5th and the 6th labors, with cleaning out the Augean stables and then dealing with the sons after. There's like 6 altars that... There's a lot of occulted magic. I'm going to be interested to get maybe Ammon's perspective. We may be catching him off guard, so we don't want to get everyone's hopes up. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So let's go. What else?
So stay here. So here's Hercules wrestling. How do you say, Antaeus?
Mm-hmm.
It's famous in their erotic pancration or wrestling battles. And in the original Olympics, it was the Olympians, the 12 of them, would take part in, like Hermes would battle Apollo, and, you know, Heracles just loved wrestling, anybody that liked to wrestle. And he was taught wrestling by a certain Autolycus, which means the lone wolf. You know,
that's cool.
So there's a lot to unpack there. And we've also talked before about certain articles we found, these PubMD articles that deal with the flies of Heracles. And it's on the road to the Olympian game, and it deals with these pesky flies would drive people mad. And, you know, there's a lot of episodes about gadflies and how they drive people mad. And around the Olympic Games was those pesky flies. And they would do the sacrifices, and they would come for the meat, and so they didn't want that. So there was a thing where what the authors posit is that it was the Amanita muscaria fruiting season. And they would plant the Amanita mushrooms on the way to the Olympian route, so that at that part of the season, it would drive away the flies. And as well, the athletes would take the Amanita to take part, you know, to give them magic powers. These are certain people talk about, a lot of authors. Beautiful. You know, about the relationship with psychoactives, mushrooms, and flies, the Amanita muscaria. And there is evidence to mushrooms being taken in the games.
Well, Carl Ruck writes about this wolf cult stuff in the Olympic Games and the mushroom. I'm almost certain. I'm trying to remember where I saw that.
Yeah, we got the beast initiate. It's called the lycanthropy of Hercules. That's where a lot of this comes from. Because after a while, I was like, what? And then you guys went to thing. Carl Ruck is like, oh, he puts it all together. And so so let's hit the next pick. You know, and part of the evidence of the pre-offering ceremony was dedicated to Zeus Apamios, and that means shoe fly Zeus, like shoe fly, go away, are the Miargos, which is he who chases away flies.
Well, there's also that famous image too of the bull with being bit by the fly, right? Zeus is often the bull, right?
and there's also connections to Beelzebub and Zeus and the Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
You know, there's different things. And here is what Persephone and Corey with some mushrooms that are part of the stories, just to show you that mushrooms are there and present in the ancient iconography. And like I said, it was that time of the year they would.
Who did you say this was again? Sorry, you cut out there. It was the Corey and who?
Persephone.
Sorry, it's Persephone and Demeter then, or is it?
I think it's Persephone and Corey.
No, because Corey is Persephone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's her other name. Yeah, Persephone and Demeter. Yeah, that's her mom and the daughter, Persephone, are Corey.
Sorry, I didn't mean to trip you up there. I just didn't hear you.
So I threw that in there just to show you that there is mushrooms iconography that's available in these images and symbols, and the doping scandals that we talk about, you know, present in the Olympics. So let's go to the next pick. So I want to show you an older version. That's not even older, but another reference to the games that's outside of Greek mythology. And this is in the Bible right here, 2 Maccabees. And we've talked about this before when we did our episodes about Melkart and the Tyrian stuff. And this is 2 Maccabees 4, and it says, now when the game that was used every 5th year was kept at Tyre, the king being present, the wicked Jason sent from Jerusalem sinful men to carry 300 didramas of silver for the sacrifice of Hercules. So every 5 years at Tyre, they were doing the Herculean sacrifices and doing games.
Beautiful.
And that dealt with the male part, Hercules, and the dog finding the purple in the olive tree, and the resurrection, the hierogamos of the funeral games of the dead king.
Yeah, we've unpacked this a bunch, but you know, we have to recognize that they're right there. There's that temple to Melkart, Heracles, where they have the stele of Heracles that eventually becomes the pillars of Heracles. And that's where they did all these king rites, you know. So a lot of this stuff is coming right out of this area in Palestine. It's wild, you know.
And they would play games. It says it was the game, and they would do sacrifices. People posit human sacrifices. The purple was involved. They even we forgot to mention the purple was involved in the modern Olympics. Didn't they paint the field purple? The new one, that's the theme. The artistic director said purple is the theme.
Yeah, so a friend of ours sent us this thing here. I'm just going to pull it up about the official color for the Olympics, and it's just too funny. It says, okay, yeah, so this was from the CBC. It says, Camille Yevinick, director of brand identity for Paris 2024 Games, said her teams had worked on the color palette for 2 years. Ultimately, they picked purple for the Stade de France track as a reference to the lavender fields of the south of France, where cities such as Nice and Marseille are hosting some Olympic Games. But we all know what the purple is really about. It's about that royalty, those empire rights. It's about the magic. It's about that Median cult.
yeah. You know, and connected to these games, these Melkart Heracles games, was the Marzare feast. We've talked about the Marzare feast, which is like agape love feast or the funeral feast, because this is about the resurrection of the dead king, and making funeral beer. And how that's connected to the Last Supper as well, the resurrection of a king and taking part of his body at the birth and dying of the king. ancient rituals and playing games. It's part of it. It's part of the mythology. Yeah. So some people call it the Feast of Bacchus as well. So let's hit the next pick. All right. So that's Melpart right there. There's another version of Melpart and another version of the games, and they're called the Isthmian games, and that's the Isthmus of Corinth. And what that is Melcartus or Melcertus is part of the myth of a dead, and it's a funeral game to celebrate Melcertus. And in this one, they have Poseidon. They honor Poseidon. But Poseidon, they do horse races on land and swimming to honor Poseidon, because Poseidon has horses, but in the sea, his seahorses. And the name, is people posit, is Melkart. It deals with Hercules, because part of the epitaphs of Melcertus is Balimon, which means the wrestler, which is an epitaph of Hercules. Because, I told you, he's into the wrestling thing.
Well, Balimon is also one of these deified mortals. He gets thrown into the sea and he wrestles with a dolphin and then gets resurrected and deified. Oh, I'm pretty sure Balimon, I'd have to look it up on Theoi, but yeah, there's some wild stuff there.
And in this one, I think women were allowed, and they did, besides athletic games, they had musical competitions. People do poetry and have musical battles, like rap battles. It's looking like rap battles. They would do their poetry and say their thing, and the crowd would clap, and then the next person would do his poetry. And then, they have a cipher, which meaning to go around, and then the audience would choose. And then you get your crown, and I think at this one was celery. You get a crown of celery at the Isthmus Games, so, and besides that, all right, so this is part of the Panhellenic Games, which is Isthmian, Olympian, which we've talked about, and there's two other ones, which is the Nemean and the Pythian. And so, all right, with the Nemean Games, it deals with Hercules battling a lion and taking out a lion is part of it. And also, there's funeral rites for a young child named Opheltus, who was killed by a serpent. And his father, his name is Lycurgus of Nemea, another Lycurgus again. It deals with funeral games and Lycurgus in these wolves. Yeah, and this child that's killed by a serpent. So then if you go over to the Pythian games, it also deals with killing of serpents. The Oracle of Delphi and Apollo. And at the Delphi Oracle, they had a bronze wolf statue that was dedicated to a version of Apollo that's called Apollo Lycus or Lycogenus. Because Apollo and Artemis are born of wolves, Leto. In some versions, Leto's a wolf. Or it means to be born of light, Lucas, like a Luciferic element. It means to be of the light in some of the older etymologies. I'd love to ask Amin about that. Or to be from Lycos.
Yeah, because Leto, to expand a bit, right? That's the Titan goddess of motherhood, right? The gentle, the demure one, right? She was the one who was relentlessly pursued by Hera, after they gave birth to Hercules.
Yeah, no, and the story has some of all the elements, symbols that we've been talking about. So let's hit the next pick.
Right. And her sister is Astrea, right? Virgo.
So earlier you were talking about it's Apollo and his lover, Hyacinth.
Yeah, with the discus.
Yeah. And you can see, look down at the bottom. Underneath him, the dead person laying there is the brown discus. See it?
Wow.
At his hand.
Yeah, I do see it.
Yeah, because in the story, Apollo's playing with the discus with his young lover, and the young lover gets all excited and tries to grab the discus, and it bounces and hits him in the head, and he dies. And so because of that, the gods turn him into a magical flower. Now, this magical flower, hyacinth, you can get a purple dye from it and use it for snake bites.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, it's part of the myth, And like I said, there's versions of Apollo being wolf-born, and Artemis being wolf-born, and Artemis is wolves. You know, it'll factor into the story later. Yeah, and so, and part of it is Aristides. You know, if I'm saying it right, Aristides.
Yeah.
And he talks about the wolf cult, are from older games. It's part of the older aspect of the games. So let's go to the next pic. All right. And right there, that's one of these statues to Apollo. That's a wolf dedicated to Apollo. Just so you know, I threw that in there just so you could see it. And so from here, we're going to shift over into the Patrios Agon, the Agones. If you want to go to the next pic. All right. So that's a picture of one of these female goddesses, or female virgins, let's say, a teen youth. And so we were talking about not the Eleusinian rites, but the Eleusinia, which is a harvest festival, and for corn, and to Demeter, and they would have games, and the women would take part in games, and the men, and the games were called the Patrios Agon, meaning patriot games. In the word Agon, he's a daimon in competition. He has an altar at Olympia, and was honored at Eleusinia as the god of competition. And it's one of those statues that doesn't have arms. You know, these weird statues they got. And part of it, we talked about tragedies in the past. And tragedies deal with goats. It's a goat song. And comedies. Well, these are agonies. And agonies are competitions. Because you agonize. It's like, what is it? The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat? Is that Olympic saying?
Beautiful.
And that's what an agony is. It's competition. You have to suffer over it. And so these are a form of competitions. And so there's another form of them, which is called the Heraian games, which are old too. And these deal to the goddess Hera. These games are dedicated to Hera. And some authors say that they're older than Zeus. The cult is older than the Zeus cult, the Hera cult. And the women would do these track races, these virgins, teens, 16, 17. And you can see the outfit is one breast is exposed. You know, right. That was part of the outfit. And
related to the Amazonian thing, right? Because
they're going Amazonian.
When you go back to the earliest sources, it's just one breast exposed. It's not actually the removing of the breast. That's kind of like a later exaggeration, you know. And then you get weird things where historians try to justify it and say, "Oh, it's so that it's easier to fire an arrow." And it's like there are plenty of fine women archers who don't need to lop their chests off to be able to fire. You know, it was an exposed thing. It was part of the it's part of what made you identifiable as an Amazonian warrior.
Yeah, no, they were proud. It was like it was a look. You got respect. The other women looked over at you like, "Oh, you're Amazon." Like, stay back. Like, you know, the dudes didn't say nothing stupid to you. They knew better. You know, you might get cut up right there.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, if the sources are to be trusted, right? You land on some Amazonian shores, you may just wind up on a pike, or you may wind up raped and then on a pike.
You know, and so we're talking about older versions of these games, and these are the Heraian games, which they say are older, dedicated to the goddess Hera. And there's an Etruscan version. Let's go to the next picture. Right here. So here's an Etruscan version where Hercules is getting fed the lactognosis. It's a big part of it. And it deals with also the lupine energy of feeding Remo and Romulus. There's a couple of articles out as well that deal with the psychoactive nature of it, because the transforming the bioprocessing of hallucinogenics through body fluids, through the milk. And so in here, you'll notice he has a beard.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He seems to be fully grown, taking his medicine.
We have a bit of a surprise here. our friend Neil has joined. I didn't think Neil was going to be able to come in today. He originally said he could make it.
I thought he was starting at 3, and I just got back, so I asked Amo to send me the link. I was like, I can join. They just started. Shit, I can join.
Yeah. We're kind of in the middle of Dion's presentation here.
Go ahead. I'm going to stay quiet. I'm watching. This is fascinating.
If you have anything to
where we're at
in.
is it's a Etruscan version of Hera feeding Hercules breast milk, and he has a beard in this version.
I heard you.
My beard like yours. His beard is nice.
I heard you mention the wolf people, and then Anatolia. There's another tribe called the Lucaians.
Yes. And on the Gagaturk flag and older Turkic flags, as well as Romanian and Daci, is a wolf on their flag.
Yep.
Because what we're exploring is that the wolf hunting rituals might be one of the precursors for these Olympian Games.
Oh yeah. And they were called the wolf people by even the Persians called them that.
That's right. So now, and in this picture, so what happens is he gets a little too nippy and starts biting a little too hard. She pulls back, and the gall of the milk flies out, and that becomes the Milky Way in some of the myths.
Damn, yeah, that's right. I remember that myth now.
Yeah. So all right. So let's hit the next pick. All right, and like we said, this deals with the lactognosis and Remo and Romulus feeding off wolves, the Apollo Lycus, the Artemis Lycus,
and they claim descent. They claim descent from the Pelasgians too. Yeah.
Pelasgian wolf cults. The lactognosis. So we're talking about the epitaphs, and in one version you got the Lyceum.
Yeah, Lyceum.
Yeah, and that means the wolf's lair dedicated to Apollo.
Right.
It's a wolf's lair. If you look at the thing in it, the root of it. We've been talking a lot about Lycurgus coming up on the disc as the father to one of the boys that slaughtered. They have funeral games, and how wolves keep appearing. So what we're going to do next is go to some Spartan stuff. Look at some Spartan rituals. So hit the next pick. Right. Well, there's Artemis right there. I want to throw in a pic of Artemis with her dog, because the dog is symbolic of the wolf. It's a domesticated wolf. And in other versions, it's the wolf. So
connected to the dog star too.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. And so because of that, I didn't even throw this in, but that picture that we showed of the Olympics with the satire plate, the charger plate with Dionysus on the plate, that took place on July 26th, which is considered a dog day, or the heliacal rising of Sirius.
Yes.
When they would do the rituals, which is also Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th of Av, the saddest day of the year in some Jewish myths, because it deals with the dire straits, and it moves on different days. And with the heliacal rising, the induation happens, the gators come out, the Nile floods, and they do the gator rituals where they play the gator games that deals with Sobek. And when you get the fat from the crocodile, that's mesh to be anointed.
On the island of Crete, they called the star Yakar. Yeah. And it's a Dionysian / star.
When we go into the origin of the Pythian games and we look at the origin of the Python himself, he comes out after the flood, after Deucalion does his whole thing. The goddess of the Nile herself retreats and gives birth to all these monsters, and one of them is Python, according to Ovid in the Metamorphoses. It's wild.
And another thing too, Diana's called Lucifera, right? She's the morning star. That star, that dog star, the one that comes every year at the summer solstice, the hottest day of the year, it marks the days the floods are going to come. It's the brightest star in the sky, like by far. It's like it takes all the brightness away from all the other parts of the sky because it's so bright. It's like another sun. And there's the morning star, which is Venus, every morning, but then there's the morning star, and that's the dog star that only comes once a year. So there's more than one morning star, and the dog star is the morning star. It's also connected with Diana.
Oh yeah. And you guys brought up Crete. Now Crete, they had the bull jumping. I was going to throw in those pictures. The frescoes of the wrestling games they played at Crete, and the bull jumping. And think about the Minotaur. When you got to escape the labyrinth, is that not a game?
That's definitely a game.
So next we're going to talk about some Spartan stuff. Go to the next picture. All right. And so now we're going to talk about, all right, so the Spartans, when the kids came of age, they teach them these sporting rituals, fighting games, and in some of the rituals are myths. They had to wrestle wolves or kill wolves, and they would do a ritualized meal together, a banquet called a syssitia, with older men and the younger kids. But then at a certain point, they had a ritual that would come up called the krypteria. And people translate it to mean the secret police or the secret ones. And at this certain point, certain Spartan teens would take off their clothes, jump into a river or a pool, swim into the woods, and go naked and howl like wolves and carry knives. And from that point on, they would stay on the outskirts of Spartan society, and they would hunt what's called the helots, which are lower class Spartan citizens.
Yeah, enslaved citizens. Yeah. And
they could kill them. They had legal rights to kill them, so they would hunt them like wolves. And they would see some helots walking, let's go kill them. And they would rape their girls and kill the dudes and take their bounty. And they would do that for a number of years.
Check this out, right? This is just to highlight what you're saying. You have the Hieros Gamos.
Yeah.
Holy games. It's also the name for the word for marriage.
Yeah.
You mentioned Dionysus, or you mentioned Crete, and it was originally Ariadne and Theseus, but then they just kind of like pull Theseus out of the mix and just make it about Dionysus. By the way, it's almost like the bull gets his revenge. Dionysus is represented by the bull, and he ends up marrying Theseus in Ovid's Metamorphosis after Theseus marries Ariadne, so he takes her back. So the bull gets his revenge against Theseus. But the crazy part about this is they had this down here. It says the best known ritual example surviving in classical Greek is the Hieros Gamos enacted by the Anthesteria, by the wife of the Archon Basilios, so the leading king, Archon king, in Athens, originally there before the queen of Athens. But Dionysus, presumably, this ties back to the original of the origin story. Like, how they brought Dionysus. Everyone thought it was Jesus, but it was Dionysus the whole time. Dionysus, presumably represented by the priest or the Basilius himself. In the brief fertilizing mystical union engenders Dionysus of double unions, a god of mortal man and one night, result through telegony and semi-divine nature of Greek heroes, Theseus and Hercules. And so basically Dionysus is this king of the games, if you will. He's like the leading character of these games. He's the king of the game.
It's so wild. There's so much speculation about this. A lot of it gets into the archaeology, but I remember I was talking to I can't remember her name. Anyway, but there's a bunch that has been said about the purpose of this bull leaping within Minoan society in Crete, and the academic consensus seems to be that it was about gaining prestige enough. Whoever won the bull leaping, whoever could leap and survive this foolish act, would then get to have relations with the priestess, and then their child would then be the chosen child who could potentially be the next priestess if they were a female, and this is the origin of this earliest version of this matriarchal rite of how you would achieve, like, what male from the society is the most prestigious and most beloved by the gods in order to mate with the queen. It's the one who can conquer the bull and not die.
It's also an opportunity for a class mobility.
Exactly.
Somebody from the bottom class can train all year, jump in the games, and then now they're royal. Now they're part of the higher upper class. It's pretty interesting how they do that.
And you get prestige for a year because you get to wear the crown. That's why they're called Stephanos, the crown games. They're not prize games because you get clout, respect, which is worth a lot more than money to some people.
You became famous. You became famous overnight.
Oh, definitely.
The way like in the West or America and Europe, we all have our favorite actors and favorite musicians. Greece was like that too. They had it.
Oh yeah.
And this imagery and everything, it still survives into our modern culture. Think of the Fool card, right? It's the bull leaper in the earliest versions of the tarot is the Fool, right? And also you see this imagery just everywhere within a lot of these running of the bull ceremonies and the bullfighting that you see in Iberia, which was heavily Hellenized, you know? So this stuff still survives even into our modern period. It's just become occulted, right?
Yeah.
So let's hit go to the next pick. Right. And we're going to go into the last set of games. And these are called the Lycian games. And for here, the book, one of the good ones is called The Beast Initiate, The Lycanthropy of Hercules by Karl Ruck. You got Plato, Plutarch, Ovid, and Pausanias. And so in the first one, Pausanias talks about the Lycian games, that they're the oldest. And for that, you go to the birthplace of Zeus, which is Mount Lycus, Wolf Mountain. And in this version, you got the king of Arcadia, and he tries to feed his son to Zeus. Zeus figures it out and turns him into a wolf. And so Ovid talks about it, Plato, that the Lycia are these Lycian games. At Mount Lycos, they would do sacrifices, cannibalism. There's evidence they found this just a few years back. The bodies there up in the mountain. And part of the ritual, and this is what Ovid says, the priest would do a sacrifice and then all of a sudden take off their clothes and run away really quick. The shepherds would throw spears and rocks at him and try to hit him.
No way.
And then they would come back a while later after they circled some kind of sacred site and then have a big banquet or feast or supper.
You know what? You know what's in James Frazier's book is the Babylonians had this ritual, the substitute king ritual.
Yeah.
And he's actually
king for a day.
He's actually correct. I've talked to Syriologists about this. They actually had this where they would have a human sacrifice victim. Sometimes people would sign up for this shit, like they wanted to be the victim because it puts them into with the gods, right? And so they would sign. So they had people, whether it would be someone that they just conquered or somebody signing up for whatever. I don't know how they chose these people, but once a year. Or I think not even just once a year, during times of like famine or something.
Yeah, when there was problems, you get the scapegoat, the Azazel.
They would select somebody, a human. They would dress him in.
You know what his name is? The Pharmakos.
The Pharmakos. I didn't know that, but they would dress him in purple, and they would put a crown on their head, and they would, commit.
Yeah, you could have all the women he wants, food, and then he would party it out, and then kill him.
That's what he says. He was selected one of the virgins of the society to be his like wife for the whole 24 hours before it happened. And she would stand there and even while he was like, I don't know what their methods of execution were, but even while he's being executed, she would stand there and like hold his hand and be like, "You're going to the gods," and like cheer him up and stuff. This is, but think about what the Gospels are doing. You got Jesus being called a king, mockingly being called a king. This guy is being a substitute king. He's not really a king in Babylon. He's getting given purple. Jesus is given purple. He's given a crown. Jesus is given a crown. And he's executed. And then there's Mary by his side. Think about that.
Yeah.
It's like the Gospels are playing out the substitution king ritual.
Well, this is something that a lot of scholars make a big deal about, okay? When you look in the ancient Greek tradition, you don't really see within the greater culture, especially within the philosophers or within the plays, any real acts of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not something that is a part of the ancient Greek myths, you know? The fortune happens to you, good or bad, and you have to just deal with it. There isn't this sense of forgiveness. Outside of that is that goddess Ilios. But where we do see forgiveness, where it does persist within the Greek cultures, in the mystery rites, where it's occluded with the soteria, the savior, the one who allows you to die and rise and achieve apotheosis and go through the cycles. And then that evolves in the mystery cults into the forgiveness Christ myth we see with the scapegoat and the shepherd. But it has this evolution over time because there's this necessity within the greater culture. They don't have a lot of that forgiveness, right? They live in this very harsh, brutal kind of world, right? And then the mystery cults allow that sense of forgiveness to come in. It's an interesting thing to think about.
Wow.
One last pick, and this is Ovid. And
the rape of the Sabines. Oh my God.
No, this is the Lupercalia. The Lupercalia festival, and with the goat thongs.
Yeah.
They whip people say it's the root of Valentine's Day. But look at the root of the word, loop. Luper, it's a lupine, it's a wolf ritual.
Yes.
And that's what Ovid says. This goes back to these wolf rituals.
Yeah.
That,
The Arcadian Lycaea. That's what he says.
Yeah.
The
Hunting rituals. And so after a while, you stopped hunting and sacrificing and cannibalism and what have you, and they become games.
By the way, Lupa means she-wolf.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lupercalia. It means she-wolf. It means she-wolf festival.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'll leave it with that. The games, some of these games go to hunting rituals. Oh, there you go. Remo and Romulus.
I just pulled it up, actually. The definition of it. It's from Wikipedia, real quick.
And there's that she-wolf right there.
Female wolf. Boom. It's really, you're not like saying anything like, this is like facts. This is just facts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, werewolves, lycanthropy. Yeah, Carl Ruck's take on it is mystical. Like, he puts it all together. He said these root cutters were doing lycanthropic rituals, dealing with wolves and Etruscan, Pelasgian symbology. Like,
and that's the important part about the wolf myth. Is the most important thing is they claim and they make this very clear. All the poets, all the historians of the Romans, all will agree that the Romans are from the Pelasgians, or Tyrannoi, which is another word they use for Pelasgians.
So the good doctor has joined us. How are you, Ammon? How's it going?
Thank you. I'm doing well, Snappy. I've been watching, incredibly impressed, because when you said you were going to do one of your shows about the Olympics, I was like, oh, God, that is something I know nothing about. So I want to jump in. I want to jump into the stream, just in my experience from looking at that wolf. And that Lucina on the Greek side is what that is that priestess of the wolf, and she's constantly entering in to the picture of the mystery rites. So much so that she's the central figure that is the Isis that Apuleius portrays. And it's absolutely, it's astoundingly beautiful, because the Romans are sitting around saying, we are descendants of Lupa. That was her, right? The great she-wolf.
Can you elaborate on that? Because isn't that not connected to Leto and the Amazons as well? Because you see all this stuff with Leto being the wolf, and she's the goddess of motherhood, and then you have the one breast out in this lactognosis that they seem to be doing. What's going on there from your perspective, Ammon?
Yeah, it's one cult. It's the cult. If you look at it this way, it's the cult that you're tracking. It's not, these are different civilizations, different cultures, different regions, right? But they have a common cult that they're practicing. And that's what you see with the mother of Romulus and Remus. She's a priestess who is impregnated by Mars. Do you understand? So the same, when you talk about the virgin and the birth of that child of God, when you talk about that line of inheritance, the line of kingship, that's something that the Romans were establishing, centuries before there was any Christianity out there. So yeah, that's a good solid. If you can track, I'm sorry, Dion looks like he was going to say something.
Well, I had a pic I came across. It was called Maritus Lupus, the wolf of Mars. And it also deals with Ares. It's an epitaph of Ares as well, because Ares had an altar at the Olympian Games. And in that form, it's the wolf of Mars.
You know what? I'm so glad we're doing this stream right now, because one of my projects that I'm working on is like comparing the classical period to the Dark Ages. And I'm reading through some of these source books that I have, looking up the Olympics, trying to find some little nuggets for this. And it's like, it's all happening in the 6th century BC. That was such a magical time period. So it says right here, Pythian Games, 586 BC. Isthmian Games, 580 BC. Nemean Games, 573 BCE. What a world that produces all these amazing games and festivals and festivities and mystery religions and different sculptures and paintings and plays and different types of education systems and all these different types of building structures, architects and Doric columns, Ionic columns, Corinthian columns. What the hell happened to the world after this? And the Olympics is such a great way to look at it and compare, because guess who ends the Olympic Games? Theodosius. Of course, he ends everything. He literally ends the world as we knew it before. He starts a new world, and that's why I'm calling it the Dark Ages. I think it's very clear what happened.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and more people just need to call it out, right? We've had an overcorrection in modern academia, right, where we're no longer looking at the material reality of the Dark Ages, where we want to say it was somehow better than it was. But no, there was real oppression, at least in terms of the philosophy. I'm sure, yeah, you can find places where people lived their good lives, but you can find that at any time in any place in history.
Exactly. And by the way, just to highlight how free the Greeks were. You know, we talk about Adam and Eve and how like they became ashamed of their nakedness, and that's a big theme in Judeo-Christianity and Islam, is being ashamed of your body and being ashamed of your own instincts. Well, listen what the Greeks did in 720 BCE. This is in 720 BCE. Dionysus of Halicarnassus was writing back. He lives in the 1st century BC, but he's writing back about a time in 720 BCE. He says, the first Greeks to strip and run naked was Acanthus, the Spartan, in the 15th Olympiad, 720 BC. Before then, all the Greeks were ashamed to appear at the games with their bodies entirely naked, as is clear in Homer. The most reliable and earliest of witness when he was the heroes girding up. So after 720 BC, they were like, we don't give a shit if we're naked or not.
We even saw it on display fully with this whole Feast of Dionysus thing, because during that display, one of the male dancers had a display of nudity, and the Christians lost their absolute mind, saying that we need to like ban them, and they're satanic, and they're promoting male nudity, and they're showing, how dare they show male nudity to children. And it's like, the French couldn't give two Fs. You know, you could be nude on your front porch in parts of France, and no one will bat an eye.
And I would argue because in the neoclassical period, which is French, it's like a second Renaissance happening in France, right? Where they're building all these amazing Greek-looking Corinthian columns and sculptures of Venus and Dionysus. I would argue that brought back into the minds of the French people what it's like to be a Greek.
Right.
That's why they like that.
Yeah, that's why they camped it up. You know, I got a question. Part of the research I came across was that the Spartans initiated the nudity, the gymnikos, at the events, but also Lycurgus of Sparta. And the word is, how do I say it? Eunomia?
Eunomia.
Yeah. Has a special place.
He's a great lawgiver. He's like when Moses wants to be like. He's like Moses is a wannabe Lycurgus. Lycurgus was a great lawgiver. He founded the Spartan constitution. You got to read.
Does that mean of the wolf? Does that mean of the wolf or the way of the wolf?
It means basically wolf-like.
That's what, if you had to come up, if you had to force an etymology of it, sure. Everybody knows what the word for butthole is, and the reason it's proktos is because the Spartan custom of being with boys.
Wild. So I wanted to bring up some sources so that we can get into it. When I was looking into the games, the earliest game that I could find a reference to was the Pythian games, and this comes much later from Ovid, but I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to read it for us here. So this is some Ovid, and this comes from the Metamorphosis. And it says, after this, the earth spontaneously produced the world of animals, when all remaining moistures of the miry fens fermented in the sun, and fruitful seeds in the soils nutritious grew to shapes ordained. So when the seven-streamed Nile from oozy fields returneth duly to her ancient bed, the sun's ethereal rays impreg the slime, that haply, as the peasants turn the soil, they find strange animals unknown before, some in the moment of their birth, and some deprived of limbs imperfect, often part alive, part of the slime inanimate, are fashioned in one body. Heat combined with moisture so conceives, and life results from these two things. For though the flames may be the foes of water, everything that lives begins in human vapor, and it seems discordant concord is the means of life. When earth spread over the diluvian ooze, felt heat ethereal from the glowing sun, unnumbered species into the light she gave, and gave to being many an ancient form of monster new created. Unwilling, she thus created the enormous python. Thou unheard of serpent spread so far athwart the side of a vast mountain, didst fill with fear the race of a new created man. That god bears the bow, a weapon used till then only to hunt the deer and agile goat, which destroyed the monster with a myriad of darts, and almost emptied all his quiver, till the envenomed gore oozed forth from livid wounds, lest in dark oblivion time should hide the fame of this achievement. Sacred sports he instituted from the python called the Pythian Games. In these the happy youth who proved victorious in the chariot race, running and boxing, with an honored crown of oak leaves was enwreathed. The laurel then was not created, wherefore Phoebus bright and godlike, beauteous with his flowing hair, was wont to wreathe his brows with various leaves.
By the way, one thing I just noticed too, the way we count our time is based off, well, we try to fix it with the CE and BCE thing, which I try to follow, because if Christ is born in 4 BC, then he's not even following it. So why should we? Anyways, we fixed that. But seriously though, our time is based off the birth of Christ. That's what they try to do in the time of Gregory. Anyways, in the ancient Greek world, you know how they did their time? Off the Olympian Games. They would say, oh, during the year of the 15th Olympiad, this happened. During the year of the 19th Olympiad, this happened. That's amazing. I just thought about that. It's such a clear distinction between the Judeo-Christian world that we're still a part of and the old classical world, where they measured their time based off the Olympiads.
But it's also like, just going back to the Pythian Games here, this seems to be the one from everything that started it all. And it also seems to be like there's conflating stories. There's some stories that say that Apollo instituted the games to honor himself, but then there's others that said that Zeus made him do it because Zeus was upset that he killed Python, and this was a great sin. And that ooze from Python is what gives Artemis the power of her arrows, and what gives Apollo the power of his arrows. What are your thoughts on this, Ammon?
Yeah, and sometimes the python is feminine, because we're talking about priesthoods here, and sometimes the python is masculine. And that whole change of priesthood with the slaying of the dragon, like Hercules is doing, who is leading this cult, right? We got to remember the Olympian Games are only there because he founded them, right? So the fact that he is in the culture, you know what his culture is? His culture is one who calling themselves children sown from dragon's teeth, or sown from the fangs of the viper. Yeah, Dion.
Yeah, part of the myth they came across is that they plant the dragon's teeth in the ground.
Well, Pindar talks about a bunch of this stuff too, with the Olympic and the founding of the Olympic Games.
Yeah, Pindar he's like the Michael Jackson plus the Beatles in one back in the ancient days. Like, he was every year the top of the charts, winning all the awards for the best poet, best rhapsodist. Pindar is the greatest. They deified Pindar. They made a temple of Pindar, and somewhere I forgot where it was.
There's two past. Go ahead, sorry.
He was a douche. Let it be entered into the record. He was a douche to Corinna, who beat him. I forget which game it was at, but she got the first place and beat him out for it, for composition, lyric.
He was so used to winning that he couldn't handle it. Yeah. So, by the way, can I say something real quick? I have a story that Amon's going to love about the Olympic Games, and it tells you the spirit of the Greeks in comparison to the rest of the world. I was going to say Persian, but it's just the rest of the world. Where Herodotus talks about this story, I could read it, but that's actually pretty short. Let me just read this real quick. Herodotus says a few deserters came, men to the Persians, men who had nothing to live on and wanted to work. When they were brought before the king, the Persians asked what the Greeks were doing. One individual asked, On behalf of them all, the deserters told them that the Greeks were celebrating the Olympic Games and watching athletic contests and chariot races. He then asked, what was the prize for these games? They replied that the gift was a crown of olive leaves and no money. When the Tritanochames learned that the prize was a crown and not money, he could not keep silent, but said before everyone, what kind of men have you brought before us to fight against Mardonius? Men who compete not for material things, but just for excellence? And it's like the Persians cannot wrap their head around that the Greeks are playing for nothing but fame and excellence and no money. That's like such a Greek thing if you think about it. They don't care.
The only reason why Achilles fights, right? How do they eventually convince Achilles to fight? Because if you don't fight, you'll never be famous. Don't you want to live forever? Then he finally relents, But this is an ongoing thing. But I want Emin and Neil and Dion, I want us all to unpack, because Emin kind of touched on it briefly, but this is a central theme, is that what we are witnessing with this Olympian is a displacement of this earlier chthonic feminine religion, right? That is the root of these mystery rites. And it's this Hecatean kind of cult that we see that's representative of the Medusa, of the Sphinx, and of course the Python itself. All of these are these monsters in the earliest forms are female goddesses and priestesses who are running temples and who are powers unto themselves that then become displaced by this Olympian masculine Herculean cult. Am I not right?
Yeah, I think if I can start, I think you're onto some cool history that we don't know, because we don't want it to look like the feminine is the precursor of the masculine, but it is. Just like those oldest schools are coming from Lesbos, and they're feminine. You also have as we talked about before, Dion talked about before, you also have the Hera. And what are these girls doing? And did you notice that it's some kind of initiatory rite, it looks like, because it's only open to these girls, and they have to be a specific age, right? And they dress like this, and they go out, and what are these people doing? It looks like a feminine precursor, because those girls are a reflection of that matriarchal or woman. I don't even want to call it matriarchal, but even though they do have queens, I want to call it driven, the society, authorities. It's coming from a feminine core. It's coming from a feminine core. And if you'll notice, right, we don't have the team. Where's the team from the Amazonians? They don't do this garbage. What are you talking about, bro? Hercules is fighting them. He's supposed to go off and get somebody's girdle, right?
Yeah, Pensilothea, isn't it? He has to steal her girdle, and she's the queen of the Amazons. Yeah, there's some weirdness going on there.
What does she do to him?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to. Doesn't she seduce him or something? Or
he ends up, serving one of the Amazonian queens. He ends up serving as her sex slave.
Right.
And he has to. They're into cross-dressing. And it's a huge deal. We have this on Roman mosaics, for example. Here is Hercules, and he's wearing this great looking nightie in it, and she's like, throw me some grapes, you idiot, right? Love it. But these games, the origin of these games is what always throws the scholars off. And they don't know, was this practice at the Heraian? Was that the precursor to the Olympian Games, or what's going on? If you just realize that this area of the world, this Eastern Mediterranean, is full of the static that is the Scythian cultures, the horse cultures that are marauding cultures, right? They are not citizenry, right? They are not members of the polis. That's the distinction. right? They are not anchored to a specific place. I mean, they have territories, right? They have territories, but they're marauding, laistic cultures. So if you see, Dion was talking before about, just taking somebody's junk, you know what I mean? Just coming in and taking their junk. That's what they're doing. And they come in and they stink of weed, right? And they come in and they pillage, and some of them have that stuff in their eyes, right? Those people are crazy, right? And so this whole wolf culture thing is kind of the product of this Greek culture rubbing up against the Scythian. And when I say Scythian, I include the Amazonians in that with their arrow poisons.
Before we jump back into this game talk, I just want to point out, when we're looking at this idea of this chthonic feminine culture that was displaced in the Bronze Age by this later Greek Olympian culture, I think the clearest way we can see that, not only do we see this in the mythologies, which we all have discussed, but we see this paralleled with the later tradition. The cycle repeats, and the Christians do the exact same to the Greek Olympian tradition. Right? We see this on full display. Satan becomes reduced to Pan and Saturn, merged into some kind of parody. The greatest sin in their version is to be possessed by a demon, when in the Greek world, one of the most precious things that you could have is to be blessed with the possession of a daimones, right? One of the signs of Socrates' genius, what calls him a gadfly, is that he has that daimones that pesters him, right? And this is a sign of genius, but it becomes totally inverted. So what I want people to recognize is this act of vilifying the other, and displays, especially with later cultures that come, right? And it's this narcissism of small differences, because the Greek Olympian is based on this mother cult. All their rights, all of their power, their magic is coming from that previous other. Just as with Christianity that comes to displace the Greek Olympian, it's still taken from the Olympian, and it's not even original. It's this narcissistic, small difference bullshit on full display. And it's all about powers of control and manipulation of myths, but they're all resting on this great mother cult core, this kernel from a bygone era.
Speaking of that, Pindar, there's a scholium about Pindar. He didn't write this, but it's about him, where him and his pupil Olympicus, it's his name, Olympicus, they were traveling and they saw a mysterious flame on a mountain, and it was attended by strange noises or whatever. And they walked up to it and they saw Rhea and Pan, they were like coming out of the fire, like it was like a miracle scene, whatever. So they dedicated the temple right there on the top of the mountain to Pan and the Great Mother. But it's like, that's the foundation of this culture, is that Great Mother,
Absolutely. And when you start to dig into it, you even see that it's the Great Mother in many, many, many different forms. And this is not an issue for the ancient Greeks. Rhea and Cybele are the same, right? When the Phrygian cult shows up, they just incorporate it into the Dionysiac cult, right? We see this on full display. They'll shout Iwa and they'll shout Attis at the same time,
Saba, and then Saba right after that.
And Sabacton, right?
Yeah. I got a question. Part of the research was Iacchos, the Dionysic cry.
Yeah.
Is that a wolf howl? That's what some authors had posited, that's based off the howling of the wolf.
Might be. You're muted. Amon. Muted.
Get this. Iacho can be used for animal sounds like the howling, but it is particularly used in the case of the hissing of the serpent. You see, Iachos was originally a dragon. Do you remember who his father was? His father was a dragon who made love in deception to the Korah. And that's who his father was. That's why the devil and Bacchus are the same individual. It is through that serpentine fang that we're able to bring the devil into the world.
And also you have the frogs too.
Yeah.
Those
Well, we
frogs.
have to recognize, right? Who is Dionysus but the ruler? He's the god of the earth, right? He's born of the woman Semele, but he's not a demigod. He's a god in the flesh.
Hades.
Right? So he
Hades.
is Hades.
Yeah,
Exactly.
They call him straight up Hades.
Plutarch literally says Dionysus, Serapis, Pluto, all are one. So it's not just Dionysus and Osiris; it's Dionysus or Dionysus and Sabazius, but he's also saying it's Pluto too. So through some sort of mysterious reincarnation, he's also the king of the underworld.
It's all those myths of cycles. He's the dying and rising god. Julian says this in the hymn to King Helios, that Saturn and Dionysus are the same. Saturnalia by Macrobius, they say it again. Yeah, these are later texts, but these are deep Hellenic philosophers, people who lived this and saw a living tradition.
And they're citing old Orphic hymns to prove their case.
So Snappy, can you pull up that Olympic picture, the first picture?
Yes, of course. Let's see here. Oh, actually, I can just boop. All right.
Since we're talking about the satire as the satire plate in Saturnian energy.
Yeah, cutting things up, right? What is Satyr? A lot of people get this confused with Kronos, right? I remember one of the first conversations I had with Ammon was asking this, because scholars want to separate Titanic Kronos, ruler of the earth, the reaper, the one who castrates Uranos, and the Orphic Kronos as the god of time. But really, when you listen to the Greeks, how they conceptualize time as being cut, as being divided into its infinite points. And this act of dividing is magic. It's that an act of invoking reason. So cutting things up on the plate, that's Saturnian magic, remixing, spreading things around, right?
It's the satire before the agony, the competition.
That's how the tragedies perform too. They have the chorus would come out and do some satirical chanting, and then the tragedy comes out.
Yeah, the satyr plays, right? You have that one satyr play with that trilogy. That's yeah. What do you think the whole intoxication mood is of? So if you look up Iago, you're going to find that they're going to put two digammas after an epsilon, Ewacho, right? So if you can just follow that, because Ewadzo means to be the Eve pulled from the side, to yell, right? To cry, to shout, right? Ewa is a shout. Ay is a shout as well, right? That Bacchic, and not just any shout, but a specific Bacchic cry. So even that word Iacchus, like when you look in the Orphic hymns and it says Aphrodite is that the one who sits with, or companion, the one who sits next to, seated next to, she is that for Iacchus, right? She is that for him. That is what how the duality, not the Trinity, works. Love it. Some of the points, Dion, that you made were, foundational and beautiful, and everybody needs to read Pindar and see what the hell's going on in the Olympian Odes, just to get some background. But other than that, the references, the only thing I can add, like, uniquely, because I was thinking, what can I say when, that is not something that they can just look up and find, something that you yourself have done. And I can say on the medical side, you can look at athletes and the regimen, and Galen goes on ad nauseum about the regimen of athletes, right? And how you're supposed to take care of them, what kind of diets you're supposed to give them, how much exercise, how much rubbing, right? When I saw that, I was like, wait, Diet, exercise, and rubbing, that's a part of their medicine. And you think to yourself, wait a minute, all these years I'm supposed to be getting a couple of rubbings every day? What's going on, right? The whole care of those athletes is phenomenal. The other thing is, from the medical perspective, the brutality. You talked about the different, events that could be involved. You mentioned a few events that can be involved, and there was one that was basically mixed martial arts. It's what it was. And the only thing you couldn't do was, bite? I think you couldn't bite or gouge eyes. Those were the two things. Everything else was fine. So boxing the genitalia, all that kind of stuff, was on board. And submissions, they were very active in causing submissions. Anyway, the doctors write about it in detail. And those things were deadly, man. Those contests were deadly and dangerous. And you have to realize the people going into them knew that they could die in the process, right? Ancient Greek boxers wore metallic bands around their knuckles, right? You can kill somebody that way. Well, that was part of the deal. Every once in a while somebody dies. So all of those statues, those classical statues of Hercules, they're so, passionately sympathetic, that show him beaten up, that show him with that cauliflower ear, the big over protruding brow from being hit so much, in a very passionate way. That's really the spirit of those early 776 Olympics, accordingly founded by the dude Heracles. And remember, Heracles has his cult temples all over the place, right? You'll find those as you're going through Greece. You're like, another temple, another shrine to Heracles. What the hell, right? Yeah. And notice, please, it's another theme with the Olympics. Notice, it's always rubbing up against the Amazonians. It's always rubbing up. Even in the Olympic Odes by Pindar, he talks about nobody can go up against these Amazonian women with horsewomen with their arrows, right? They're unstoppable. So it is a huge deal for Heracles to be able to go get the girdle of the queen, right?
You ready for this real quick? So Pliny the Elder has this crazy story about an Olympic boxer who got deified. He says, he's talking about the Oracle at Delphi. And he says the same oracle, and with the ascent of Jupiter, the supreme deity, this is obviously translated through the Latin, so Zeus, Euthymus, the boxer, who won all of his matches at Olympia and was only once beaten, was made a god in his lifetime and to his own knowledge. So he was made a god even before he was dead. He was a god on earth, deified. His native place was Locri in Italy. I noticed that Callimachus records an unparalleled marvel that the statue of him there and another at Olympia were struck by lightning on the same day, and that the oracle commanded that sacrifice should be offered to him. This was repeatedly done both during his lifetime and when he was dead, and nothing about it is surprising except that the gods so decreed. That's an Olympic boxer being deified and being made a god. So this shit is real. This is not just some random little kid stuff.
That's amazing. That's a great find. So Ammon had brought up the Olympian Odes, and I wanted to read a passage from the Olympian Odes, which tells us about the labors of Heracles and the foundation of the original Olympic Games. So let me read this for you. It says, "The laws of Zeus urge me to sing of that extraordinary contest place, which Heracles founded by the ancient tomb of Pelops with its 6 altars, after he killed Cetistus, the flawless son of Poseidon, and Eurytus too, with a will to exact from the unwilling Aegeus, strong and violent, the wages of his menial labor. Heracles lay in wait in the thicket below the Cleonae, and in his turn overcame those men by the roadside. For once before those arrogant Maliones had destroyed his Terinthian army, when it was encamped in the valley of Elis, and indeed was not much later before the man who betrayed his friend, the king of the Epeans, saw his land with all its possessions, his own city, sink into a deep channel of destruction, beneath unyielding fire and blows of iron. A fight with the stronger man is impossible to push away. So even he, by his own senselessness, lost of all, found himself captured and did not escape sheer destruction. But the brave son of Zeus gathered the entire army and all the spoils together in Pisa and measured out a sacred precinct for his supreme father. He enclosed the altis, the altars all around, and marked it off in the open. And he made the encircling area a resting place for feasting, honoring the stream of Alpheus along with the 12 ruling gods. And he called it the Hill of Kronos. It had been nameless before, while Anomos was king, and it was covered with wet snow. But in this rite of first birth, the fates stood close by, and the one who alone puts genuine truth to test, time. Time moved forward and told the clear and precise story, how Heracles divided the gifts of war and sacrificed the finest of them, and how he established the 4 years festival with the first Olympic Games and its victories. So even Kronos is the foundation here. But isn't that kind of interesting? It came out of that fifth labor, isn't it, where he has to clean out the stables, and then Eurythemus won't pay him, and so he gets the sons together, because the sons at first want to see Hercules get a fair wage, and then he tries to get them to join his army to go fight their father, and then they turn on him, and that's what we see here. He has to kill them, and then he sets up these 6 altars. What do you think's going on with these 6 altars? Because there's some clear cult stuff. Ammon, do you have any thoughts? I know I'm throwing at this as from the sidebar, but yeah.
There are 6. Yeah, let's just see what happens. I'll just swing wildly and see if I can hit that pitch. There are 12. Who are these 12 gods that he's talking about, right? On this hill of Cronus. Are you watching the birth of Olympus coming from an older astral religion? Is that what we're seeing the coming to fruition of here with Heracles? You get that a lot. Remember, Heracles is spreading a religion. People don't understand it. They think, oh, it's just myth. It's just a story. And it's just like something we put in, Hollywood, put in, New York, put it on the play, stop. Heracles historically is spreading a religion. He's spreading a religion. And that religion only allows young boys to be initiated. It is not for women whatsoever. It is a complete reaction to the power of a woman. But the funny thing is it is powered by one woman who's the only one able to enter it, and that's Medea. Right? One person. You have to always remember that these little temples, these little shrines of Heracles are places where we are specifically following the mystery that he was pushing, right? His mystery with his Hylas. So it only makes sense that he is replacing priesthoods, right? It only makes sense that he goes in and kills off the dragon priesthood.
They say that which festival is it? One of the Dionysian festivals was only women were allowed to attend. So there's a balance going on there. There's definitely it's not just like one-sided thing. There's different festivals with different rights for women and men.
Well, we can clearly see this kind of sexism all throughout the Herculean cult, right? It's essential to the Herculean mysteries and this whole version of what's going on. And it is, like we can see, it's very much a reaction to the Dionysian and then the Maenadic. There's even a lot of jokes that happen when Dionysus and Hercules confront each other, right? Hercules is always calling, "Oh, Dionysus, you may also be a son of Zeus, but you're a fop and you wear weird leather booties and you're always with women."
You little bros him. He always little bros Dionysus.
Right? And he's always making fun of him, which is why, like in Frogs, right, when Dionysus has to pretend to be Hercules to go into Hades, the joke is that no one would ever believe foppish effeminate Dionysus as Hercules,
who, by the way, don't forget, Dionysus has a female avatar of himself called Misa.
Right.
He's got a hymn. She has a hymn dedicated to her in that form, Misa.
Exactly. Well, he's clearly a representation of this phonic energy, right? He's like Faunus in the earth. It's that same kind of, right? As we're seeing, it's all about these cycles. It's that same energy, that time going all the way down through all these different variations.
You know what struck me in that last paragraph you showed was he calls it the Hill of Kronos.
Yeah.
Is there I wonder if there's a reason why is he just hearkening back to the old father? Or
Kronos is right, the father of the 12 Olympians, and like Ammon said, they're establishing this new lineage, right, on which they're displacing the Titanic line. You know,
I forgot about that. Okay,
that's why they have the satire plate in that Dionysic image at the Olympics. It deals with the satire plate part of it too.
But we're going to get into some deeper stuff.
That's Satan.
We're going to get into it some deeper here because Pausanias, in his descriptions of Greece, has a really good understanding of this foundational Olympic myth. It's a little bit long, but you guys will appreciate this. So it says, as for the Olympic Games, the most learned antiquaries of Elis say that Kronos was the first king of heaven, and that in his honor a temple was built in Olympia by the men of that age, who were named the Golden Race or the Golden Daimones. When Zeus was born, Rhea entrusted the guardianship of her son to the dactyls of Ida, who are at the same time called those Curetes. They came from the Cretan Ida, Heracles, Painonius, Epimedes, Iasius, and Idas. Heracles, being the eldest, matched his brothers as a game in a running race and was crowned the winner with a branch of wild olive, of which he had a copious supply. Sorry, what do you want to say?
That's Iasios. That's the name. That's the same. Almost. If you're replacing with that alpha, the eta, and you get Jesus. That's the same root word for the healer, salvation God.
Right, the drug man, Jason. Right.
That's crazy.
Beautiful. So we continue. Such a copious supply that they slept on heaps of its leaves while still green. It is said to have been introduced into Greece by Heracles from the land of the Hyperboreans, men living beyond the home of the north wind. Olin the Lycian, in his hymn to the Achaea, was the first to say from these Hyperborean Achaea came to Delos, when Menelaus of Cyme composed an ode to Opus and Hecate, declaring that these, even before Achaea, came to Delos from the Hyperboreans, and Aristaeus of Proconius, for he too made mention of the Hyperboreans, may perhaps have learnt even more about them from the Isidones, to whom he says in his poem that he came. Heracles of Ida, therefore, has the reputation of being the first to have held, on the occasion I mentioned, the games, and to have called them Olympic. So he established the custom of holding them every 5th year, because he and his brothers were 5 in number. Now some say that Zeus wrestled here with Cronus himself for the throne, while others say that he held the games in honor of his victory over Cronus. The record of victors include Apollo, who outran Hermes and beat Ares at boxing. It is for this reason they say that the Pythian flute song is played while the competitors in the pentathlon are jumping. For the flute song is sacred to Apollo, and Apollo won the Olympic victories. Later on there came, they say, from Crete, Clymenus, the son of Cardus. About 50 years after the flood came the Greeks in the time of Deucalion. He was descended from Hercules of Ida. He held games at Olympia and set up an altar in honor of Hercules, his ancestors, and other Curetes. Given to Hercules the surname Peristates, assistant, and Endymion, the son of Aethelius, deposed Clymenus and set his sons a race in Olympia with the kingdom as the prize. But yeah, you guys get we can keep going.
Oh, by the way, I love Pausanias. What would we do without Pausanias? He gives us the last picture of the world and what it looked like. If we didn't have Pausanias, we would be guessing at like what the world looked like in the 2nd century. He's walking around and seeing all these beautiful temples and sculptures and Pythian games. And by the way, notice how they make sure you know that Zeus fights Saturn. That's the opposing forces of God and Satan right there. Dios and Saturn. And you have that picture there. But it's hearkening back to the time where Iasios is still alive and Zeus is not even in power yet. Because the story goes at the third plowed field, which is in the harvest, which is in the fall, Iasios lays with Demeter, gets her pregnant with Plutos, and then Zeus kills Iasios. This is talking about a time when Iasios is just running around with his gangs and chilling, the young Iasios. So this is going back to the golden age. This is when Saturn is ruling.
Exactly. And it seems to be that this game was how the first game, at least Pausanias is positing, that the first game was between Zeus and Cronus, and Zeus won, and that's how he became the ruler of the heavens, by beating his father in a game. Isn't that wild? And I didn't read it because it was getting a bit dry there, but it connects it to the later reestablishment of the game. So the oldest archaeological evidence we have is for the games as established by Hephaestus of Elis, and that comes after the Dorian invasions. There's like this time of anarchy during the city-states, and Hephaestus goes to the oracle at Delphi to ask, how do we solve this issue of the anarchy? And that's when they come up with the Olympic truce, which basically prevents anyone from moving. The truce wasn't just that you couldn't fight, was that you weren't allowed to move from city to city during this time unless you were going to compete at the games. And this comes from this. Go ahead. Sorry.
It chilled out the Spartans from the Athenians, from the Pelasgians, from the Trojans, and the greater Italians. They're all allowed to join these games now, even if they're at war. Sort of like today. We're at war with Russia, and there's Russians in the games in the Olympics, and so it's sort of like keeps the world together in a way. It's a
really beautiful idea, and it's an expansion, because when we look at the Aeolian order over Olympus comes about through this traditional way that they managed Olympus. You had 3 different tribes, and they would compete in these games to establish who would be the head of Olympus. And then they just kind of expanded it to all of Greece. It's really interesting that these competitions are what bring peace.
But you notice how it made it clear that it starts off with 2 opposing sides, Saturn and Zeus. So you have to have these different nation states that are warring with each other come together for the games.
And we also see, like Chronos Saturn is representative of this chthonic, natural Bronze Age, earlier way that's displaced, that Zeus then replaces with his Olympian patriarchal form.
Saturn was all about equality too.
That's what they tell us, right? This is why during the Saturnalia they flip the poles, right? And all of a sudden everyone is free again, and you have a new king and all of this stuff.
They didn't even need people to work the fields and the plows because there was so much growing, swelling fruits everywhere, and everyone just ate all day wine was abundant. It's like it's like the paradise before the fall. I wouldn't be surprised if the gospel or the the Pentateuch authors were drawing from that motif when they're creating their paradise and their fall and all that stuff.
Almost certainly.
What do you think, Amon? Or Dion?
I'm still thinking about that Heraian, and I'm thinking about the flow of science and technology and the worship of the muse and those arts. They said, I think it was Pindar actually, who said the thunderbolt of Zeus is the spear of Athena. And I'm trying to find somewhere in the text where they acknowledge this feminine precursor. And I think if we understood the history better, we'd understand that these societies that are rubbing up against each other are influencing. You can see it in the language, you can see it in the archaeology. And I think the games specifically, because I would love to say it was a female priesthood who came up with the whole concept of the games. We've been saying it was Hercules. It was Hercules. It was Hercules, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Her name has Hera in it too, Hercules.
Well, that's why I wanted to show that the oldest games, according to the Hellenes themselves, were the Pythian games. And the Pythian, right? Python is related to this ancient mother goddess cult. When I started to look into Python, it seems to be connected to this primordial serpent that we see in many different cultures. Many of the Greeks themselves compared this with the Uraeus and of the Egyptian, right? Which is that power of the sun, the light of the sun. And that Dion knows a bit of this. What was that serpent goddess in the Egyptian? It's going to bug me. Who's the Uraeus? You know a lot about the Egyptian, don't you? Dion?
Oh, there you go. So you were talking about, what's the Wajet? I think is the snake goddess.
Thank you. I couldn't remember the name. Wajet is the name, but that is Python in the Egyptian, and she seems to be primordial, related again to this flow of the Nile and this outpouring of nature and the unfolding of creation, generation, and of course all of the drugs. You know.
Why?
And a lot of the myths in the Egyptian one, real quick, is based off killing snakes. Apop and Heru or Horus, and they're killing snakes on the boat. That's a big part of their myth, but go for it.
Why is it that all of those oracles that Heracles bumps up against, why is he always killing the python, right? Why is he always killing that source of the poison that he inherits? Have you noticed that? This religion of Heracles is going around getting drugs. They're getting drugs. Now, Euripides was well aware of this when he wrote the Heracles, because Heracles says twice in the play, he says, I've been where I just was. I was in hell, right? I'm back, and I'm going to go back there. He says that twice. It's very strange lines. But his fury that he's there to save his wife and his children, but he enters into a state of mania driven by Lyssa, who is that insanity that all of the medical texts are talking about how to cure. Heracles suddenly is there to save his family, and what does he do? He kills them all. He kills his wife with his kid. He's got a little kid with him. He's got a whole bunch of kids, right? And he's shooting them all, hunting them down, because he is in a state of possession. He's in a state of possession. And all of this is coming to you thanks to his own arrows. It's amazing. It always goes back in the myth. It always goes right back to his arrows. What does he do? He kills the Hydra and he uses the poison. What does he do? He kills the Python and he uses the poison. right? He's always like,
Yeah.
this is not a native Greek thing. This, you know how there are wolves and there are dragons, or if you wanted to put it another way, there are werewolves and there are vampires.
Ooh.
These two systems have been governing the mystery from the beginning.
Yep.
Right? And
Competing cults.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And you can see when one takes power, what happens? It's all the oracles all of a sudden light up. They were using those oracles to control civilization and the planting of society here and there and here and there. And they're running up against this power that is at least the wolves, right? The wolves, the priestesses who are working the temples of Mars, right? Who are producing the sons of Rome, right? Those people are those wolves are running right up against the cult that is descendant from the teeth of the serpent.
Yeah.
Right. And
Check
you
this out.
can see it. You can see them engage with each other over time. It's gorgeous.
Oh, it's so true too. You're talking about something that still is reflected in modern film and books and novels and all this stuff. It's like in our DNA to want to bring out the werewolves and the vampires in the way we tell stories. It's mind-blowing. It's something magical about it. But check this out. This is from the first dynasty. First dynasty. I'm not kidding. It's in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is in the museum right now in British Museum, number 10,477, sheet 11. Anyone can look this up. I'm not making this up. This is straight up. This god was called Satanu. Satanu. I'm not kidding. That's the name of it. It's a serpent. It's not the god of like evil. It's the god of immortality and being born again, because that's what the serpent brings, immortality. And it says, this is what the Egyptian Book of the Dead actually says. I am the serpent Sata. Or it's up here. It says, the Chancellor in Chief Nu, triumphant. So it's Sata Nu. I am the serpent Sata, whose years are many. I die and I'm born again each day. I am the serpent Sata, which dwelleth in the uttermost parts of the earth. I die and I'm born again, and I renew myself, and I grow young each day. That's crazy. That's Satan.
That is amazing. That is so amazing. And it's also Dionysus, the dying and rising god, right? We're getting into all this. And there was some stuff I was reading that was really interesting that posits that some of this games too is represented in the Dionysian mythology, right? There's this whole thing with Zagreus where you have to fool Zagreus with the spinning top. And then there's all this stuff where they continue to fool him with the games. And every incarnation, he has to be fooled again to lose his throne so that he doesn't displace Zeus. How does Zeus keep in charge is that he doesn't allow that energy to dethrone him. And he does it through this magical energy of making you look one way, distracting you. Look at the shiny spinning top. Look at that strophalon. Don't pay attention over here. Don't take in multiple perspectives. Don't use fucking reason. Just look straight ahead at the thing on the wall and be amused.
What do you think about the sacrifice and the eating, the consumption of the god, the eating of that flesh? What do you think about that? Why is that in this whole cult? Well, I mean, I know we just talked about wolves and vampires, but eating of flesh and drinking of blood, does that work in somehow?
Yeah, that was part of it. It was Ovid, Plutarch, and Plato and Pausanias talked about these Lycaean rituals at Mount Lycos, Zeus Lycos, involved imbibing the prey like a wolf would. Cannibalism. Even so that the main altar there, they found a young boy in the middle of the main altar. Once they dug it up, it opened it up right inside of it. And another thing at Mount Olympia, was a pile of bones, a big giant pile of bones. It's famous to this day. The altar's high, where they would sacrifice oxen and stuff. Now, one question I have is, why is that Shivic, Dionysic, Bacchic guy on the plate at the Olympics blue. Is he blue or gray?
Well, in the Indian, Shiva has a blue neck that comes about from ingesting poison. That then the poison is removed through the process of lovemaking with the goddess Parvati, and then she somehow is able to suck the poison out of his neck, and then they spit this antidote that they've transmuted the poison through their lovemaking into something that's pure. They spit this into the amrit, the churning of the ocean of the milk, to make the elixir of immortality. And that's what's happening on the Indian side.
So I don't know how deep the writers of the Olympic play were in deep knowledge of like esotericism, Dionysian religion. But if they were kind of knowledgeable, they would understand that the Osirian aspect of Dionysus, which is he's the god. He's not just a grape god or a vine god. He's a moisture god. He's the god of swelling fruits in general, of moisture, of the rain and the growing of crops. That's why Osiris is depicted as a blue god. Osiris is always blue.
So and Ptah.
It might have something
to bright blue as well.
Yeah. That's my guess, is that they might have read some Plutarch and read some Herodotus.
Also, color theory, Pythagorean color theory. What is the last color on the rainbow? The final color is blue. They don't even have a word for it, really, and they have compound words for it. But it's this idea that coming to the final point at the end of the cycle, you would get to that blue of Dionysus. So it's interesting to speculate on. But we got to remember that a lot of these rites are about reaffirming and confronting the natural world, confronting Pan, right? Why is Pan the all, and why is Pan fear? Because he represents the terror and potentiality and raw chaos of nature. And in these rites, you have to confront that suffering, that chaos, that randomness, that violence. And it's also a recreation of what happens to Dionysus himself in his titanic form. He is ripped apart and consumed, right? And then later on, also as Phanes, he rips himself apart in order to pursue Eros, so he can make love to himself, so he can chase after his twin sister. And that's that initial incest rite we see with Lucifer and Diana, the root of all this insanity. Is it not, Ammon?
That's why I'm always shocked that people don't get it, who it is in the apocalypse that is the dragon who is consuming its own child, or oops, I slipped there. The dragon that consumes the child of she who holds the stars, right? And sits above the moon. Why is it he's sitting there waiting to what? To eat it, right? Don't you understand? If you were part of that dragon branch, right? And when I say they're calling dragons these guardians, temple guardians, cult enforcers, those and wolves, right? They're talking about two groups of people, right? Neither of these people can take on the Amazonians. We get to the point we can put it up on our sculptures and whatnot. We can show you. But all of that tech being fed by this pharmaceutical stuff, you have to go into that pharmaceutical or that maniac understanding of the world to understand it. It makes sense what they're doing. After you realize, oh, this is how the cult is operating, then it only makes sense. And you're going to get different moods within these cults, whether they're lycanthropic or whether they are descendants of the isn't that weird? That's how they call it, the descendants of the tooth of the dragon, right? That must be gorgeous. You know what I'd love to see? I'll just say this. I'd love to see one of these descendants. I'd love to see what the use of those venoms would do over time. And I'd love to see like the way that they raised them. It's probably scary. You'd probably be like, oh, don't hurt me. Right.
Well, I have one question. One thing that I came across was the root of the word Lucifer, Luke, light as Lyco, the wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's posited that they're related. Could they be related, right? Yeah, definitely. I don't know originally. I don't know, because we don't have that earlier text, you know what I mean? And this happens a lot in classical philology where they'll say, oh, this is a Phrygian word. Oh, this is a Lydian word,
Yeah.
right? In the Greek. And you don't know. Well, then how's it used? Right. So yeah, does that driving wolf, who is that? You got to admit there's a connection there to Apollo, and with a connection there to Apollo and the light and whatnot, you're going to think, is this another form of a priesthood that was meant to protect these oracles?
Oh my God! I just thought of something.
You're driving it.
The dragon in Revelation calls himself Apollyon. So it's Apollo, the destroyer.
It's so clear when you start to read a lot of this stuff, because Apollo often will show up as this beast figure, right? This is full on display if you read the hymn to the Mother of Gods, where you have this fiery beast who is also the drug, who calls out to Attis and calls to Attis to imitate the mother. And then what does Attis do? He castrates himself and then rides the beast. He literally rides the beast now that he's castrated like a woman to ascend to the stars to be placed with Venus, the mother, right? Is that not what's happening in Revelation? Like it seems pretty parallel to me.
Remember, they're throwing out all of their magic books, and they've got $50,000 worth of magic books. And I think that was in Ephesus. They've got $50,000 worth of magic books. What do you think's going on through these people's minds, right? These are the gods that those people are worshiping, praying to, and performing chemical rites to, right? And you got, oh, if your daughter wants to be put through the initiation, she has to bring X, Y, and Z, and we're going to ferment it. We're going to bury it in the ground for 2 weeks, and then you're going to take it, and we're going to add some lizard lick thing to it, and next thing you know, you're going to be in the beyond. And this is what you need to do. It's almost like flight, like you give them flying lessons or something. I swear, Snappy, whenever they talk about witches, the good ones, the Thessalian ones, being able to fly, I know that that's got to be something not like what we're thinking Superman does.
No, notice that it's always turning into birds, Ammon. Aren't they?
Yeah.
Because in both, okay, so I checked out, you got us to check out the other version of the Metamorphosis or the Golden Ass. And in both versions, the witch uses a ointment to turn into an owl, which I thought was striking. I wanted to pay attention. I thought maybe that was
so obvious. No. I just looked it up. It's so obvious. The connection between light and wolf, the moonlight. That's what it is. And this is actually, I just looked it up too. It says in lycoris is a Greek word meaning twilight, related to lyco, meaning wolf, because the wolves come out at twilight.
Yeah, I remember that in the thing. That's when they come out, and that's when it's time to get out of the forest.
So the ancients connected twilight, which is where you get the word light, lux, with wolves, Lyconia, twilight. That's crazy.
And so what are we doing?
The whole idea of werewolves at midnight at the full moon, that's ancient Greek, baby. That's not even modern.
And what are we doing there, right? Like we're doing something heralding dawn somehow. We're performing in that, very Luciferian period.
Dawn bringers.
We're bringers of dawn. Yeah, isn't that gorgeous? Oh God,
I'm so glad.
It's no wonder that the Nazis grabbed onto that and talked about the great black wolf and how she is involved in the cult with the moon. It's no wonder they did that. They understood that.
What's so funny to me, Ammon, is I've been thinking a lot about these tyrants in general, and this idea of ascending the throne and becoming that monist deity. And then I'm just thinking about Trump, and I'm like, Trump, if he's really going to go forward with this, he's going to have to do what Aten and Heliogabalus did. Is he going to cut off his dick and embody the feminine? Like, is this really what you freaking want? If you're going to be that monist uniter of culture, that single person that represents God on earth, that's the next step. You got to unite the feminine now into you. Otherwise, it's going to explode in fiery rage. We've seen that cycle repeat again and again.
Pull up that source right there. Pull up that source right there. I just want to read it real quick. Lycoris is a Greek word that means twilight, related to lyco, wolf. In Greek mythology, Lycoris was a nymph who captivated the sun god Apollo, who named her after her enchanting radiance that shone at the boundary. Get it? The boundary between night and day, which is dawn. That's crazy.
Beautiful.
It was so clear. I don't know how we weren't thinking about that. It's so clear.
When the Christians get up and go out and celebrate at this very time, they're doing it for these reasons. It's an integral part of the mystery. You can tag that mystery by saying what do they call the performers? What kind of people are? Oh, they were the night dancers. They were the dawn bringers, right? It's amazing how prevalent that is within the expression of the mystery. There's something special about that.
The first time Christians are mentioned in Roman sources, Pliny was it Suetonius or Pliny the Younger? Yes, like around 112. Very early on. This is like no one knows who Christians are at that point in time, especially Romans. Maybe some Greeks do, but Romans don't. And so Pliny the Younger confronts these people. He finds them. And what are they doing? They're getting up at dawn and singing hymns to Christ as a god at dawn. Why at dawn? Well, Revelation tells us because he's the morning star.
Right. And then if we look at the other defining feature that sets the Christians apart, it was the act of baptism and the rite of baptism. But what's wild about this is when you dig into the Greek on this and you look at the ancient sources, okay, you get this word bapto, which means to die, but also baptizo used to mean to die. In its earliest versions, it means literally to die, but it was the act of when you dye something in the early forms, you have to submerge it into a liquid in order to be dyed and then pull it out. So it's related to the purple. It's related to this act of Christing, right? It's not about being submerged in water. The Christians were doing the drugs. They were using the purple dye.
And don't forget, what does Jesus do with the bread that he gives to Judas right before Judas loses his mind? He baptizes it in some sort of unknown liquid. That's what it says. That's what Mark says. He baptizes his bread and then gives it to Judas. Judas eats it and goes, ah! Loses his mind.
I've got a follow up to that on my episode tomorrow night that I'm going to have a special short story episode about the murder of Judas and what happened. And you're going to be shocked when you find out what the Greeks
Are you going to show the baptism part of the bread?
No, I'm not going to.
Oh.
Well, yeah.
You should show that.
I was actually going back through John. It's in John 13.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I probably should. When he's sitting on his lap and he comes up to his breast, right? The little kid.
Yeah.
Right. Coming up to his breast. I was looking at that again. And that follows it when he baptizes the bread, it follows it. So that's brilliant. I'm going to have to include that.
By the way, about that little kid that lays on Jesus, like they're like in a marriage or something weird. People today will, when you bring that up, they're going, that's not true. There's no way that's true. I've never heard that before. And I'm like, this has never been a secret, ever. Look at all the Renaissance paintings. Look at all the depictions of the Jesus in the Middle Ages. He's got little John hanging on his lap like this. Nobody was hiding this. Everyone knew this. It's only recently people tried to like shove that aside. Like, don't talk about that.
There's that whole style of art where they're depicting Jesus with a mash of schlong, but it's his robe, right? He's on the cross with a giant erection. And if this does not scream the Heros Gamos, I don't know who's not paying attention, because in the Melkart rites, the Melkart Hercules rites, what they used to do is they would strip him down, shave off all the hair of his body, make these cuts, then apply an ointment, wrap him up with the mummy, The ointment would cause him to get an erection. Then the priestess would ride him, and at orgasm, he'd wake up from his coma, and he would have come back from the underworld if he woke up. If he didn't, then he died and he wasn't fit to be king. But that's what they used to do, their version of the Heros Gamos, and this was happening in freaking Palestine.
There's millions of these.
How do you now take that entire rite that you're describing and now push it into, instead of the priestess, we have the boys, because that's what Heracles is practicing exclusively. And I think it was the Thessalian centaurs, those who had the large organs like horses, right? Everybody knows Pelasgians were well endowed, right? So Jesus with a donkey head is a very unobscure, it's plain and clear connection to the mystery rite and the fact that there's a sexual aspect of it. So but
what's so crazy is you can find these images. There's thousands of them. I mean, you can go back as far as you can find with Christian iconography. You're going to find something similar to this: Jesus and his beloved. No one was ever trying to hide this. Everyone knew this, and it was like hey, it's John's gospel. John's gospel has Jesus and his beloved.
And the beloved is almost always depicted as androgynous, at the very least a beardless youth, often holding a cup of snakes. Dion and I have showed several different paintings.
Let's see if I can find
him holding the cup of snakes. It's Ganymede, right?
Yeah,
John the Beloved is Ganymede, full on.
Yeah, there's 100%. That's what's going on there. That's what they're doing throughout the Gospels. They're reapplying these ancient Greek motifs to Jesus, and this one is particularly Ganymede. I think you're right about that.
That Jesus did not. He was after the Olympics were banned. Definitely. Did you see? Look at his physique. What did they do? Is that the language itself seeping out of their brains? Are they losing that creativity? Somebody told me. They were like, well, the Egyptians. Look at the Egyptians and what they were able to do. I have seen it. I've seen pyramids. I've been there. I've been down the Nile to see everything they've done, right? The big stuff. I've been there to see it. And you know what? One well-engineered Greek temple is a marvel compared to those pyramids. Is an absolute mind marvel. Okay? So let's not get too far ahead of the language. It was the language that was cheating. Oh God!
Look, there's your Dionysian hand symbol. We know this is Dionysian because it's all over the old.
The Sabazian hand. You know, it has the freaking zodiac on it of the 12.
Yes, there's the Sabazian hand. The serpent's in the cup. He's reaching for something in his robe. I don't know, but look at him, young, effeminate boy. This is the beloved. This is that paint. The name of this painting is called the beloved. That's the beloved.
You should smell those fingers.
I wonder who drew this. Probably
like Scream Ganymede. I don't know what does. You know.
And the colors they would have been using, and back in that ancient time, would have been a Syrian rue for the red, and the tekelet, which is the blue, the murex from the coast there of by Israel. The shells, the murex shells, because they get the blue over there.
Yep. This is the name of this painting is called Beloved Disciple. That's what it's called.
Saffron. They had saffron colors too.
Yeah, crocus. Yeah. They love that one.
Yeah.
By the way, these Renaissance painters, people will say that's a Renaissance painting. We're talking 1,000 years after they got. These Renaissance artists were part of the Platonic Academy at Venice or Florence, and they were reading Platon, and they were learning all about the Greek world from this academy that Medici set up. So these are the most smartest scholars you can think of that are drawing these paintings. So that's why I take these very seriously.
Are you sure, Neil, that he is a he and not a she?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. It could be a eunuch for all we know.
Well, and every picture, a lot of the pictures, the main ones that show the disciples, they have beards, and the beloved doesn't.
Yeah, that's the name of this painting. It's called The Beloved Disciple.
It also gets even wilder, though, when we dig into who John the Beloved is. He is the twin. He's a twin of the sons of thunder. Okay, does that get more cult than that? And who is this twin but James? And here's the thing, is that James becomes a saint of murder within the Catholic Church. He's famous because after the fall, they go to Ephesus and he burns down Ephesus. And then he goes to Iberia and he engages in the Crusades in Iberia, where the Spanish called him Saint James Santamoros, the Black Killer. And then
Matamoros.
And then it happens again. He's involved in the colonization of South America, where they use him to attack and kill the freaking indigenous people there. It's like there's some wildness going. So you have this Dioscuri twin, you have this effeminate boy, and then you have this ultra masculine Aries boy. It's wild.
This one right here is from the 6th century. This is very old. This is from the 6th century. Ready for this?
Yeah, let's see.
You can see they all have beards, except for this guy. That's another young boy. But look at the youngest of all of them is just laying on Jesus's arm with his cup of wine right in his hand. Why is he holding a cup of wine?
Our cup of snakes.
Exactly. There's his cup. That's the Ganymede cup, guys.
And the other thing too with these twins is that their mother is called Mary Salome. And it said that she was independently wealthy and that she had boats and that she was employing people to go fishing. There's some wildness going on here and conflating of characters.
No, but I think Ganymede makes the most sense. Ganymede, because he's always got the cup.
Yeah.
Can you scroll up so I can see the bottom of the picture corner down there? Oh, I would just want to see if there's an animal in the corner like usually would be. But no, there's something else.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll have dogs or cats.
Right.
At the bottom of the Last Supper.
But wildness. Anyway, we should take this. Go ahead. Sorry, Ammon.
They do that on Mithraic stuff too, Dion. There's always like a little dog in the corner or a little scorpion. Sometimes there's a scorpion right under the bull's testicles. And I sat and talked with John Scarborough about that. I was like, over a pint. I was like, why is the scorpion all like biting his testicle or stinging his testicles? Maybe it has something to do with the venoms, right? Because we have treatises that talk about what useful scorpion venom can do for your mind.
Yo.
Right? So yeah. Oh no. Yeah.
I got one more that I want to show. This one and this is my first time seeing it. I want to get your opinion on this. Ready for this? Let's see. Look at this. What are they doing to him here? What the hell?
Oh yeah.
Why is he standing right here? Right? What the hell is going on?
Well, they would also be normally laying down. We got to remember that these were happening at a time when the traditional way of eating at a Greek dinner would be to lay flat on your chest, and you would have these special types of beds that everyone would lay in. You know, so there's even paintings you'll see where Jesus and the beloved are laying together, arm in arm, while they're feeding each other.
Oh, they're spooning. Yeah,
reclining. No, please, reclining. It's reclining, right? But did anybody notice how bad the art has gotten? I mean, compare that with classical Greek art. And I've seen mosaics and stuff like that too on the Roman side that are just amazingly ornate and complex and can really bring out character. What happens with the Christian art that it goes so?
Well, so within the mother goddess traditions, and we see this within both the Greek and the Indian side, like in the Shaivite side, you have this whole process called the aesthetic tradition, or the rasas, who are these mystics who create images and plays, and they worship these myrtis, or what you would call in the Greek the eidolon. And the act of creating a divine image is about this perception of beauty. They equate it to the mirror of the goddess. They call it Parvati's Darpana, and that you have to look at the mirror, and through reflecting upon the mirror and tasting the goddess, you experience more of the reality, and you come to realization. And the realization that you come to is different than the monistic one. You reaffirm the natural world. You affirm yourself as one and many. You recognize yourself in nature and in the other, but that nature is independent. It's this grand paradox that's at the heart of this Shaivite tradition. It's like what they call qualified monism. So it's both monistic and polytheistic at the same time. And it's related to this feminine idea of perception and tasting and lovemaking, and through this perception of art, right? What you see is that this is at the heart of a lot of these pagan traditions in the creation of these plays. When they're doing these plays, right, they're getting stoned and they're trying to create a total vision of the myth so they can be transported through a portal to have a reception of that image, that eidolon drawn down from the stars, right? So within the Christian tradition, they have to vilify this because it is a reception in a way of perceiving the divine, and it is opposed to them. So they denigrate the image. They say the image is equating God, right? In monism, you can't have anything be qualified. You can't have anything be representative of the divine in the earth, because that would be to degrade the divine, to say that the divine is less than perfect.
It
right?
contradicts that there's one mind in control of everything.
Exactly.
You have multiple minds that have free will, and they're all God, they're all eternal, and they can all do their own thing. There's interactions. There's no contradiction there. But that contradicts monism, though, which is why I'm so surprised monism took over philosophy. I don't
Well, now check this out. The extreme version of that is Islam, where they ban images.
Right.
The only way they can have images is they have to write it in letters.
Oh, and that was the original intention of the people who wrote the Torah, was that images take the power away from the priesthood.
Part of the, like Ammon is talking about, like when I was studying religion studies, I remember this, part of my whole thing we had to do was we're looking at that schism between Byzantine Christianity and Chalced, like in Catholicism. And the big thing that happens is this misunderstanding of philosophy and different words. The word for image in Latin and Greek are different, and there's allowing for nuance. Within the Greek philosophical tradition, they get this whole thing about if you reduce the art to two-dimensional images, it can no longer be possessed by spirit. It can't be enthused. Right. So therefore, it is okay to look at a two-dimensional icon and have that experience. Whereas in the within the Catholic tradition, they said, no, that is still an icon. Though we can have statues of Jesus as long as we don't worship them, and this literally results in crusades against each other, the most BS of BS. But the art literally becomes degraded because they can't allow art, because art will literally allow for demonic possession. Orosius says this, and so does August of Hippo says this plainly.
Yeah,
if you get too close to images, they'll possess you.
Yep, him in songs, dithyrambos, banned dithyrambos. The only songs they were allowed to hymn are like church hymns.
Yeah,
that word dithyramb comes from thriambos, which is also the word we get triumph from, and I think that's through Etruscan. I can't remember, but I think
Trump.
it is. Yeah, and Trump. There you go.
But you can see the last strata of Roman pagan art, where you have the god Ion, who's this syncretic Mithraic / Dionysian god, and his 3 chronoi. This is in Syria.
Well,
you can see how the Christians are competing with this type of style, with the symposium style, where they're all eating and drinking, and you know what I mean. That's what's going on in this time period. This is second century, I think.
What's with all the shapes in the mosaics? It's almost like they're trying to hypnotize you or something.
Something's going on with art.
There's deep symbology here, man. Because recognize first of all that anytime you're going to see a diamond, you have the Great Mother in her 2 forms of Aphrodite Urania to the stars, and Aphrodite Pandemos down, and that's what. The down pointing star is representative of that 666. This is where that number comes from in the Pythagorean tradition. The number of Helios, the light, the descending star.
You want to know how right you are? The Pythagoreans were the artists of those days. They were the geometers. They were the architects. They were in the design buildings, because they knew math. To do good art, you got to know math.
Okay, and then the circle and the square. They tell you this in the alchemical tradition. The circle and the square. This is man and woman. okay, coming together to you get the 4, you get the 4 and the 5 makes 7. That's that's when you get the 7, that's Fani's reforms, the rainbow, the divine androgyne. So those symbols, this is all telling you the mystery encoded, coming together of male and female to create the universe, the generation.
Where the swastikas? Are there swastikas?
Yeah, we need a swastika because then you get the dark sun. That's again Dionysus, Hecate, and the strophalone of Hecate again, right?
Yeah. So right here, what you're seeing, you should see Chronoi. That's the name of his little disciple group. You got Ion, Melon, and then I think it's Enispe or Enispoe, and then I can't say. But it means past, present, future. That's what it means.
Melon is that which is about to be, or the future.
Yeah, future, yeah. About to be. Yeah, and then I forgot what these other two are, but it's you yeah, we can look at that later.
Wild. But let's take it back and wind things down. What do you got to say there, Dion?
Oh, I was going to tell people to like, subscribe, share. Check out Almond's channel tomorrow. He's going to do something special he's talking about.
Yeah, what do you got planned tomorrow? I just saw short stories. I'm super intrigued.
We're in just 30 minutes. And by the way, the best way to watch this will be on times 2. In just 30 minutes, I'm going to bring you a mystery that has not been solved from antiquity. And I'm going to show you exactly what happened at this murder. And it involves a couple of people. It involves Peter and it involves Judas. And I'm so glad to be able to bring it to you. I'm just like, thank you very much, Hail Satan. You know what I mean? Because
I saw the image. I was like, this is going to be crazy.
Yeah. Beautiful. And Neil, what do you got going on? Do you have anything new in the works? You just dropped that amazing interview.
Yeah, I still have to finish my rebuttal of Dan. I know I've been saying I was dropping it. I'll tell you my excuse. I was supposed to debate somebody, and it's a very important debate with a very popular YouTuber named Althist. And I was looking excited to slam dunk on this dude. And then he backed out and rescheduled. So I wasted a whole 14 days. I was like 10, at least 10 days prepping for this thing. And I could have been finishing my videos. But anyways, the video, actually, put it this way. I have to leave on the 14th or 15th to go to Florida. It will be out before that. No matter what, I have to have it out before that. So there's a couple days between now and the 14th. So look out for a new video for mine in the next 2 to 3 days at the most, which I will have it done. I'm trying to make sure it's perfect. I want to make sure all my sources are cited. There's no bullshit, that no one can question anything I'm saying. This is a very thorough video that I'm doing.
Are you going to Florida for an interview, maybe?
Yes.
Oh, I'm
doing like a little mini tour there. So right now, Derek's down in Florida. But the person who's actually bringing me down there is that one, Matt Bale. He's gonna get me down there for his show, and I figured why not? Then I can meet Danny again. Me and Danny are gonna record for a part 2, and then I can drive an hour to meet Derek, record with Derek, do a show for his channel, and then I'll do a killing 3 birds in 1 stone. Why not? I feel this is perfect.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. Man, we're going to get some amazing Neil content. I love it.
Some content coming out. By the way, I think so Danny wants to talk about the founding fathers and the what's the true religion of the founding fathers, the Anacreontic Society, the Statue of Liberty, the Star-Spangled Banner, and all that stuff. We're talking about that shit.
So Neil, okay. I love that you brought up Anacreon on Danny the last time, but I noticed one thing, and I don't mean any disrespect. Yeah. You didn't go to the dark side of Anacreon. We all know what Anacreon is bloody known for, and it's pederasty.
Well, he's a product of the time, though. I don't give him that much crap for that, because we're talking 500 BC, and we're talking these Greeks it's just a product of his time period.
I know, it's one of these things.
It's very dark, though. You're right. Some of his poetry is very dark.
But that drinking song, that Star Spangled Banner drinking song.
You know who else is like that though? He doesn't get as much shit. It's Theocritus. Have you read Theocritus? Theocritus is all about boys and his stuff. He's all about the boys. So I mean, it's just,
dude. I told you, Proctos is the word for buttocks, and it's different from just a regular old anus because it's that buttocks that gets hit by those Spartans. It's that boy buttocks, right? You have to understand how permeable this is, and how society has absorbed, whether it's Spartan or Athenian, right? And it's all of this that's part rubbing up against those Amazonians. And what's it bringing us? It's bringing us cults like the one Hercules got, right? So you can't, Snappy, hats off to you for bringing out, the big gun on Neil and saying, look, give us give us some Anacreon that has to do with the boys, please. Because nobody takes it serious. As soon as you start talking about that, right? And we're not advocating for that, but it's part of history that we have to discuss. Just
I will bring it up in a long format with Danny. I will explain. Like Anacreon was deep and dark.
Like,
he's
also
beyond the Dionysian. He's beyond the Dionysian.
You also got to bring up the Muse tradition at this time, because a lot of people forget. One of the things that I'm deeply interested in, and it kind of happens with the Romantics. It's sort of, we get this whole revitalization of this muse poetry. And you get all these people writing in the Anacreontic style, translating Sappho. This is when Byron comes out. You get a lot of this satanic Luciferian imagery coming out of the French tradition, and specifically Pan. Okay, you can find hundreds of thousands of English poems about Pan at this time. And this is deeply influential to the American tradition and what the Americans are coming out of, this Victorian muse tradition that's really Byronic and romantic.
That's what I have prepped for Dan's prep podcast. I have all that.
Really look into the foundation of this fight for the independence of Greece, because that becomes a rallying cry. Poe almost took off to Greece. Byron did. Right?
Not a national thing. It's an international movement between the 13 colonies, between French liberals, even English liberals who were going against their own crown, favoring the Americans and the rebels of France, and even as far as Germany. There's some orders in Germany, the Bavarian Illuminati, those guys, Adam Weishaupt and those guys. They were all trying to revert back to the Greek spirit. And
this is a big misconception with Weishaupt, and I'm so glad you brought him up, because he was a democratic socialist by modern times, and his whole idea was, we can't just bring democratic socialism and undermine nobility. We have to go to the middle class, the wealthy merchant class, and we have to slowly educate them. And the best way to do this is through this imitation of the mystery religion, where you go through these degrees and we slowly reveal the mystery. I read his writings. Half of it is like, treat women as equals. Let's believe in democracy. Let's be kind to your neighbor. Be good to your brother.
Hey, he was possessed.
What happens to him? He becomes a fucking scapegoat, and they murder him for it.
And now people blame him for the Illuminati and the New World Order. He had nothing to do with it.
He's a democratic socialist. Like, he's so milquetoast by today's standards. He'd be Bernie Sanders. He
was possessed by that ancient Greek spirit, the one like us four are. You can tell.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And Masons are coming from the same kind of fire. So are the Rosicrucians. You see, right. We have to remember that a lot of these mystery cults, the revival of them at that time, comes from people like Platon, like you mentioned, in the Medici school, this revitalization of the Greek and this poetic language. And what they did is they hid it within high academia, right? Because what we were seeing at this time is you have this emergent, rich middle class that is ultra educated. So for the first time, you're seeing this powerful, wealthy, independent elite who can move around and talk in code and resist the nobility that had been ensnaring them. This is why revolution happens, because
revolution
people, you're getting free people, and they're telling each other in plain English to each other using basic, like you can go find this. Like Pan and Bacchus is everywhere.
Ready for this?
So, but before you guys continue, everybody, I have to say goodbye.
All right.
Previous engagement.
Only down in the second year. Sorry to rant.
But I had a lot of fun today, and keep playing that game. If life's a game, keep playing that game.
Yep.
Much love, Dion. We'll see you soon. Take care.
This is what's written about him after his death, obviously. And its Weishaupt character and intentions have been variously obsessed. Some took a negative view. So says this weird guy. I don't know who that is. Despite writing that Weishaupt's goals were equality and liberty, together with the most absolute independence. That's Greek spirit right there. Are the substitutes for all rights and rights in all property. Saw this as a more dangerous than beneficial. And John Robinson regarded Weishaupt as a human devil. Of course, probably a Christian dude. Yeah. Anyways, saw his mission as one of the most malevolent, destructive as others took a more positive view, including Thomas Jefferson, who wrote to James Madison that Barrow's own parts of the book are perfectly the ravings of Bedlamite, and considered Weishaupt to be enthusiastic philanthropist who believed in the indefinite perfectibility of man and believed that the intention of Jesus Christ, blah, 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 blah. You get it. You get the point.
Right. But the point was trying to push the culture democratically through mystery rites, because you can't just, when people have been indoctrinated and abused into something like Christianity, you can't just reveal stuff to them. You know, you can't just get people to start respecting each other overnight.
That's one thing you'll notice if you read these 18th century crypto pagans, is they will try to reform Christ into a more liberal Dionysian character. And I think the reason for that isn't because they wanted Christianity to reform, but they are more or less trying to get their Christian counterparts to follow along with their way of thinking instead, and try to so you see them, they're trying to reform Christ. Thomas Jefferson does this, George Washington does this. They're all trying to do this, and I think it's a waste of time, to be honest. I wouldn't do it, but
it's
that's what they were doing.
You know, like religion. Okay, religions of control all have to usurp the true religions and true peace and love in order to manifest their power. So Jesus is really this dualistic character. On one hand, he is Dionysus, but the problem is Dionysus is that free love hippie running around, right? Look at the early Orphics. We've talked about this at length, you know. All of that control, that hatred, that patriarchal bullshit, that is the state, you know. Jesus is really just a myth of control, and it's a way to unite Platonic mythology, nationalism, and to undermine the mystery cults, to take away their power and to enshrine it in the state and give themselves control through the language. Why it's so important Ammon is teaching the language, because that's how they obscure it, through the language.
Drug them and suck them. That's what's going on. Fantastic. Thanks for inviting tonight, by the way.
Yeah.
And it was cool. You got to come, Neil. Fantastic. I thought.
Yeah, I'm glad you started later, because I made it this time. So I thought you started way earlier. So I had to.
I gave you so I accidentally screwed up in that. I told Ammon 3 p.m. because that's his time. But for us, it's
worked out then. Okay, cool.
Right. So it wound up working out. We're still going to do a part 2 for this. If you guys want to come back on the 24th.
Sure.
Tell Dion he did a fantastic job on his presentation. I was really impressed, and I was sitting there like, oh God, look at how well prepared they are. So, you know, nice job. We want to go a lot more deep into the mystery cult aspect of it in the games and the marriage as a game, right? This whole idea of the marriage of Persephone. And these marriage rites and these game rites and the establishment of kings seem to be all about this. And we'll get into this deep next time, you know, but it's going to be fun. All right, guys. Thank you so much, everyone. Please subscribe to Ammon and Neil. They both have big things on the way. And thank you all for joining us. So hail Satan. Take care, everyone.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.